Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the latest episode. So it is 10 o'clock on Friday evening. I've just got back from the plot. Everybody's going to bed quite late at the moment as the nights are drawing out, and I've been up there digging and doing bits and pieces. So I had a message from my other half to say, are we having rhubarb crumble tonight? And that is not a euphemism. I have been promising him a homemade rhubarb crumble all week, and I just have not had the time. So we're going to be rhubarb crumbling tomorrow evening. And the reason I haven't had time this week is because, as you know, I've been on a mission to get everything outside on the plot and in the ground. And so far, I have got 36 dahlias in the ground, and I've got 26 to go. And also the new cuttings arrived, which I'll tell you about in a second. So so I've been literally up there every spare minute. So I've still been doing other stuff. I'm still making hanging baskets, actually, and regular clients. And then I've been racing up to the plot, and I have to be up there in the evening anyway because the birds go to bed. So I might as well spend a few hours up there working. And it's really nice. Although tonight there were so many motorbikes going up the road, it drove me absolutely mad. Just as well I wasn't trying to record this up there, because you wouldn't have been able to hear a single thing. So getting the dahlias in the ground has been interesting. And I was really focused on getting the lines straight and the distances between them absolutely spot on so that they look really lovely. It's quite important to me. And so I measured everything out, and I put really, really long canes on the ground, got all my lines sorted out, put a whole bunch of dahlias out. I had about 9 or 10 at a go, placed them all in position, measured everything, like not with a tape measure, just my boots are 30 centimeters long, so I can roughly work out everything I need to do from those. And then I started to dig, and what I discovered was that the soil was not going to play ball with the spacings and the size of the tubers that I'd positioned. So that was a bit frustrating. And what's happened is that there are certain areas of the existing space on the plot between the fence panels that have been cultivated over the last year. So last year I had my trial beds, and I was also growing vegetables for myself up there. So some areas have had the soil cleared, they've had plants in them last year. And so the soil is really nice and crumbly. And then there were other areas where I'd had paths down, or I'd just been walking over it, or Roosty's house was actually there. And because I've transformed the space so much in the last couple of weeks, I can't remember where anything actually used to be. So I'm kind of remembering, because every so often I'll come across a sunflower seedling and think, oh, the sunflowers are here, or I'll find a bean or something. But generally speaking, because I've messed around with it so much, I can't tell what used to be where. So I'm coming across areas where the soil is not particularly deep. It's not deep anyway. We're on a slope, it's chalk, and some places there's literally only about, I don't know, 25, 30 centimeters soil. And other places it's really deep, and where it is deep, it is fantastic. I don't want to brag, but I'm just saying it is gorgeous and really crumbly, light. It's just gorgeous. Like, it's the most wonderful soil, but only in certain areas. And in other places, you just got chalk, right? And massive stones, like rocks. I'm not quite sure what happened on the field before I got there, but there are bricks, there are little tiny glass bottles, there's all sorts of stuff in the ground. And so if you decide to like put a huge amount of weight behind the spade and put it in the ground, you'll sink down like a foot straight away, and it's lovely, lovely soil. And then the other times you put the spade in and you just hit this massive boulder, and that has to be just prized out, chucked down the bottom, and carry on. So it was a bit of a mixed bag yesterday, and I was so stiff when I got home. Honestly, I could barely move, because I don't do that much digging anymore, with good reason, I've reminded myself. Anyway, I went up there tonight, and I put 19 dahlias in the car this evening, and I went up and I was like, right, I'm going to put small tubers in tonight because I am tired. It's Friday night. And after all the digging yesterday, I didn't want to be digging epic boulders out. So I took 19 of my smallest tubers up tonight, and I've put them in areas where the soil is not that deep, because these tubers don't need to be like 2 foot down in the soil. They're not that big. Some of them are literally just the size of a potato. So I thought, treat myself, don't be digging any real hard stuff tonight, just put the little ones in. So that's what I've been doing. So I got 19 in tonight, 17 in yesterday. So I've got some fairly hefty ones left to go, but I've pretty much worked out where I think the soil is going to be good and where it's going to be more challenging. So I'll just have a can of Red Bull before I tackle the more challenging areas. They're all watered in. Now, one of the things I wanted to share with you tonight is the planting instructions for Dahlia tubers that I got from my Dahlia mentor, Richard Bailey. And when I was spending time with him last year, he explained what he does. And I have pretty much followed this almost to the letter. There are a couple of things that I've done differently, and I'll tell you about that. But I wanted to share it with you. You may well already have your dahlias in the ground, but if you don't, and you're just got some questions about it, I thought, well, I'm going to run through what Richard told me. It's what I've done, and it seems to have worked out absolutely fine. So one of the things Richard did tell me was that tubers can be planted out before rooted cuttings. So here in the UK, generally speaking, well, always speaking, the rule is don't put anything out before the frost comes, because the dahlia foliage very sensitive to frost. It will just blacken off. But on the plus side, with the tubers, it will grow back. It's just going to slow you down by a couple of weeks, so everything will be later flowering. But the cuttings aren't going to tolerate frost. So if you put them out too soon or you don't protect them and we have a frost, they're going to die, and that's a waste. But we're still basking in these sort of bizarre summer drought-like conditions. We've had a little bit of rain, but really not enough. So it is definitely the right time to plant everything out now. I think it's fairly unlikely that we will have a frost. Certainly, there's nothing in the 2-week forecast to indicate that we're going to get one. So that's just to remember for next year, that the tubers can go out before the cuttings, which is helpful. So Richard says to dig a rectangular hole, and I think this is very good advice just in principle. You often see people digging round holes, and what you don't want the roots to do is just spiral around a big circle. Now, my experience in the last 2 days of planting the dahlias out is that the roots, they had these lovely white fibrous little roots, and they had filled all of the pots, and I must have had them all in 2-litre pots. So the roots had got to the edges, but they hadn't started to spiral and make a mess because they hadn't been in there long enough. But if you've ever bought a plant from garden centre or wholesaler and taken the pot off and just seen a complete spiral of roots, that is a problem. That's what happens when things are either pot bound, kept in a pot for too long, or they're in a hole and they can't, in a round hole, and they can't get their roots out. So we're going with a square hole. That's what I've done. And then what Richard does is he waters the empty hole. Now he's put here half a gallon. I've put here, rather, on what he said, half a gallon of water, and then let the water drain. Now, this is one of the steps that I missed out because, as you know, I have got hardly any water left, and it's absolutely dire straits up there at the moment. So no water in the hole at all. Then he adds a handful of bloodfish and bone or chicken pellets to the hole. Again, this is a step that I have missed out because I know that the soil is super, super rich up there at the moment. And I also have a closed system in place. It's just I've put up all these rules and policies for myself based on how I want to run the land. So I'm not bringing anything in. So the fields had plenty of chicken manure on it for years, and duck manure. So I didn't want to add anything else. What I did put in was 2 handfuls of my own homemade compost. So I hope they enjoy that. Then you put the tuber in, you kind of backfill the soil around it. So you want the tubers to be covered by the soil. And then often with the tubers, you'll have like a piece of crown that's left over from last year's stem. And there's normally one of those left over. So you can leave that pointing upwards. And then obviously, if you've got sproutings coming out of the tubers, then you can have them covered by the soil, maybe a couple of inches, but you don't want to be burying it like 10 foot under the ground. And then you backfill it around and water it again. And then Richard said, don't water again for 7 to 10 days because you want the roots to go down searching for water. Well, that is bingo for me because we have barely any water. So everyone has been watered in, and then they're literally going to have to rely on rainwater unless anybody starts struggling. And then there's nothing to do now apart from staking them, which I haven't done that yet. I've got the road pins ready to go up. I didn't want to put all the staking up before I started because I invariably reverse into things and I'll just knock them down onto something else, which always happens. I can't get the canes into the ground, which is very annoying because I had got these really, really large, very long, tall canes that I bought in the sale last year, and I cut them all down into the perfect length and then couldn't get any of them in the ground. So that is because it is just too chalky once you get through that 30 centimeters, and having it just going in 30 centimeters is not deep enough. If we get wind, these plants are going to be quite tall and they're just going to fall over and just knock everything out of the ground. So that was a lesson there. Make sure you can get stuff in the ground before you actually chop all the canes down, because I'll have to find a use for them now. That was a bit of a waste. So nothing to do now until the end of June. Oh, I haven't said what I am going to do about the staking. So the road pins are going in, and then I'm going to put string up between the road pins. So rather than staking each individual plant, which I know is what Richard does, and it looks really lovely. And believe me, if I had enough soil depth, I would do that because it looks lovely. I'm going to end up just running twine between the road pins from the start and the finish of each row. A couple of strands of string and sort of like envelop the plants. I'll put a photo on when I've actually done it. Okay, so first feed end of June. And Richard uses a Miracle Grow all-purpose. He puts 1 scoop in a watering can, and 1 watering can then feeds 5 plants. So we'll come back to that when we get to the end of June and when we actually start watering, because I'm not going to be able to do that because of the no chemical policy and no external product policy. So I will probably end up using an organic liquid seaweed. But we will revisit that in due course. And sorry if it sounds like I'm talking really fast. Like I haven't. Oh yeah, I did have a can of Red Bull a couple of hours ago. It's not that. It's because I only have a certain number of minutes every month for this podcast, and because I've done quite a lot of talking evidently this month, I've only got like 24 minutes left, and I'm really, really trying to fit everything in as quickly as possible. So I hope it's still legible. I have also pinched out all of the dahlias. I can't remember whether I said I told you that or not. After the 2 sets of true leaves, pinched out the growing tip, and some of the decent sized ones I have tried to take cuttings from. Some of them have taken, some of them just give up the ghost after a couple of days. It's always worth giving it a go. And that is so that we get more flowering stems on each plant, because if you just let each shoot go up, you'll just have 1 flower at the top of that. So by taking out that growing tip, you will, and leaving 2 sets of true leaves, you will end up with 4 stems growing up. That is the strategy behind that. So I have decided, separate issue now, separate from the dahlias, is about weeding around the perennials. So I have got loads and loads of weeds growing up around the foxgloves, around the the eryngium I've got all right, around the foxgloves, and around the peonies. And I've deliberately left them because I thought I really want the ground cover. I want to try and keep the moisture in. And it's all good to have, these plants growing that sort of feeding back into the soil all the time, because they are really, really helpful. And then we've been so short of water, I thought I really don't want the competition. So I have removed all the weeds by hand because you can't hoe them. I did do some hoeing around the Nigella, and I think they may have heard what I said on the last podcast, because they've actually put on a bit of growth in the last few days. So they're clearly a little bit frightened that I'm just going to dig them all up and put something else there. Anyway, I did some hoeing around the Nigella because I put them all in beautiful straight lines, and I managed to hoe through one of the plants. So I'm not actually going to be hoeing with a hoe anymore because I was incredibly careful and I still managed it. So that's also another reason why I'm just jinxed with those guys. Right, living paths. This is a thing. So I have lots of living paths upon the plot, and then I have non-living paths. So I'm sure you know what this is already, but if you call it something different, it's basically when you just dig the soil, dig the turf up, and you just leave a strip of grass, or you've got weeds, or you've got something else growing there. And you don't remove that, you leave it and you walk over that. That forms the basis of your path. So you're basically cutting the beds out of the turf and you leave paths that you can walk on. I really like them because I still like to have um, vegetation and something solid to walk on. And if you take the everything, completely strip everything up, which I have done, well, Nigel did it in the new area. I'm going to have to go and put paths down now out of bark or something else, and that's time consuming. And the nice thing about the living paths is that, I don't know, it just feels very natural and it looks nice, and you know that whatever's growing there is putting stuff back into the soil. It's just this constant cycle of stuff. The only downside with them is that the grass gets very long. And last year, my other half, bless him, he trimmed the paths. And I did say, make sure you don't trim all the grass like into the cut flowers because it'll look really messy. And what happened? I went up and there was just grass everywhere. And I spent ages just picking it off all the borders. So that is the trouble with trying to maintain them. And you find often that the edges of these living paths will creep into your actual flower beds. And then I have to get a pair of scissors out and chop the edges off. So it's a 6 and 2 3s. And I know I've put in the heading of this episode, like living paths, yes or no. I'm still on the yes, but they still need maintenance of their own, which can be quite time consuming because I have been all trimming the edges with scissors last night and I could have been doing other things. Anyway, so you have to see I'd love to know what you think about that actually, whether you're in favor of them or whether you just remove everything and put bark down or some other kind of material down. Right, I put my Cephalarias in tonight. These are the massive perennials. They're going to be, God willing, 1.8 meters tall, so 6 foot tall. And I had a whopping 11 of them, which, to be honest, is more than I thought I was going to get because they germinated in a really erratic fashion. And I very nearly gave up on some of them. And if they hadn't been in this massive long tray where it would have just affected the balance of it, I would have thrown half them out and I would never have even known that they germinated. These are like a giant scabious, so they should be, I'm very excited about them. They should be really impressive looking, and because they're perennials, I'll have them for a few years. So they have gone in this evening and been watered, and I'm going to have to think about some staking issues for them in due course because I'm assuming 6 foot tall, they're going to need some support. I'm not sure. Very exciting. My Dahlia cuttings arrived from Halls of Heddon. They came in the post on Wednesday and they were just adorable. I have put a video on my @Hen Hill Cut Flowers if you're interested in what they look like. Very sweet. The packaging was really nice. There was like that what do you call it, like a raffia kind of stuff to protect them, and each individual one was wrapped in what looked like baking paper, but I'm sure it wasn't. It was some kind of paper. It was all very nice, beautifully labeled, and they were all in absolutely excellent condition despite the fact they'd come on a 48-hour service. I thought they looked amazing. And so I have potted them on immediately in little tiny pots, given them a tiny drink, like the smallest of drinks. Richard said don't overwater them, and the instructions are don't overwater them as well. And they're inside with me, just acclimatizing. I didn't want to put them straight out because I don't know what conditions they've been kept in at Halls. So they're just going to chill out with me for a few days, and they can go out next week. So that is fine. Update on Goose. She's doing really well. So thank you for those of you who messaged me about her. She's doing very well and she's practically healed up now. It's astonishing. I just still can't believe it. She's going to see the vet tomorrow. He's going to give her another long-acting antibiotic shot because normally I would give them antibiotics orally. But Goose is not a lady that likes to be handled. And given how fragile her bottom still is, we just do not want any flapping about or any upset or any kerfuffle whatsoever. So she's going to have another shot tomorrow. So that is that. She's been eating sweet corn for the last few days. I went out and bought her a bag of frozen sweet corn. So she's had a good week for food as well. Speaking of which, there are greenfly everywhere. I've started to notice them in some of my gardens over the last couple of weeks, and they are really, really loving this spring. I've put a video on the Instagram with my Greenfly because I don't spray up there. I don't spray on any of my gardens. I garden organically everywhere and haven't ever used chemicals in all the years I've been gardening. And I can't start now. So normally I just wait, don't panic, and the ladybirds will turn up. So they've turned up at the plot. And you'll see on the videos that I've put on my Instagram of what they're doing rather than dealing with the problem of the green fly. So I'm hoping that when they finish doing all their business with each other, they will have a meal because there are an awful lot of green fly up there. If I lose patience and I can't wait for them, I will have to remove the green flies with my fingers, which I hate doing just because I hate murdering them. It's not that I don't want to get my hands dirty or sticky in their case. It's just I genuinely feel really bad for them. I just can't do it. I hate doing it. And I have washed them off in the past, but that is like a luxury that I will not be doing up on the plot. We don't have enough water. So everybody will have to be removed, either that or with a little tiny brush, like a dustpan and brush kind of brush. There are plenty of plants that they can go on where they don't cause any damage and they can just stay there. Don't have a problem with that at all. But when they start on the flower buds and the flower heads, that is going to be an issue for me. So if they were bigger, I'd relocate them, but you kind of can't. So we'll see what happens with that. I would hope that the ladybirds just get on with it and get rid of them naturally would be perfect. So one final thing to talk about tonight, and that is my watering system. So I'm the sort of person that if I go and visit a garden, and I do go around like the National Garden Scheme ones or National Trust ones, bigger gardens, or anybody's garden really that I can go and have a look at. And the three things that I always want to look at first, almost before all the flowers and the prettiness and everything, is all the back office systems. So, watering system, water storage, water collection, irrigation. I want to see the greenhouse, see what they're growing, see their cold frames, and I want to see their compost bins and their different compost bins. How are they storing green waste? What are they doing with weeds? What are they doing with wood? And all sorts of other bits and pieces. So they're my three things. And I do get distracted at the start. I'm like, oh my goodness, everything's so beautiful. I love this. And then I'm like, okay, where is the good stuff? How are they actually gardening this? And I had a question on my Instagram from one of my listeners, 57th Parallel Gardening. And they're over in Sweden. Go and have a look at their Instagram. And the question was my watering system and how it all works. So I thought this is such a great question. I'll run you through it. I mentioned it months and months ago when I first started, but it's well worth repeating it. And I will also put a video up on the Instagram at Hen Hill Cut Flowers, and you can have a look at what it really looks like. So on my plot, I have 3 IBCs, and I'm not entirely sure what IBC stands for, but they are the massive plastic storage containers for water that you would see on a farm or some kind of agricultural setup or professional flower growing setup. And they sit inside like a metal cage. Not entirely sure what that's for either, but that's the situation. And there's a huge circular filling hole on the top of them, and then there's a tap down at the bottom. And when I took over on the plot, I was lucky enough that there were 3 of them in the field already. One already sited and connected to a row of stables, like a brick construction with a tiled roof, and 2 of them were just on their sides, dumped in the rest of the field. So I went down and picked up the other 2, and I've put them in the plot, kind of in the center, really. They were on the edge, they're in the center now. So what happens is that the first IBC, which I call number 1, is connected to the stable. So the rainfall comes down the gutter into IBC 1. And when we have an awful lot of rain, I let it flow down into IBC 2 and 3. If we don't have a lot of rain, then I take the hose pipe out. So there's a massive hose pipe that runs from IBC 1 all the way across the entire plot, down a very slight altitude. It's a bit serious word for it, slight drop, into IBC 3 actually, and then it flows into 2. But if we don't have any rain and I want to try and conserve what's in IBC 1 because that's for the chickens, then I'll just pull the hose pipe out and bend it over so that the water doesn't overflow from 1 into 2 and 3. But assuming that I want to fill 2 and 3 up, which I do in the winter, the water flows from 1 all the way down this long hose pipe across the plot into number 3. And then I have a little tiny bit of pipe that flows from 3 to 2. And then I have a wooden shed that used to be the home of the first set of ducks I had who got stolen. But when we put the shed up, first thing I got my other half to do was help me put guttering up. I say help me. I just said to him, could you please put guttering up for me? And he did. So we've got guttering from that duck house, which feeds directly into IBC3. And then, as I say, there's this little tiny bit of hose that is an overflow basically from 3 into 2. And then off number 3, I have got a piece of hose which runs all the way to a freestanding water butt in the centre of the plot, just so that I don't want to be traipsing back to 3 all the time. And that is the accident I made because I was trying to fill up this water butt in the centre of the plot, and I left the tap from the IBC3 running, and it filled up the water butt and then just all overflowed from the water butt. That's how I managed to lose 1,400 litres of water. And because IBC2 is connected to IBC3, as IBC3 emptied, IBC2 emptied into 3 and then emptied out into the ground. So terrible, terrible mistake, that one. So always check your taps are off. So that is the setup. The really, really long hose, there's actually 2 sections attached together with a joining piece. One of those sections I picked up from the recycling centre when I was there getting rid of waste, and there was a guy just carrying this massive hose pipe across the whole recycling centre, and I stopped him and said, "Are you throwing that away?" Which is possibly the stupidest question because obviously you're in a recycling centre, you're throwing it away. And he said, yes. So I said, could I have it? And he said, yes. So I've got that. Probably should have asked him what he'd been running through it because it could have been chemicals or anything awful. And I just realized I never asked him. So yeah, I don't know about that. But and various other pieces I have just scavenged over the years. Like hose pipes are these weird things. Like I've never bought one. I always just, I don't know, there's always just one in the shed or there's one over there, or so I haven't bought anything actually for up there apart from the guttering, which was well worth it. Now, most of the water does come from the stable, so that's the tiled roof, and it comes into IBC1. And in the winter, I mean, there's just absolutely masses. It's an absolute torrent off that. And the duck house that feeds into IBC3, really not that much, not that much at all. I've also got the new metal shed, which we spent ages building. And if you've been listening for the last couple of months, you'll have heard that saga, leveling it, building it. And we've got, I say we, it's me, I have got 4 small sort of family home style water butts attached to that, and they are all linked to each other as well. So as one fills up, it flows into 2, then it flows into 3, then it flows into 4. Also super important to make sure that all the taps are off, because if you have them all connected and you leave one tap open, you can drain the whole lot out without realizing it. And then I've got another enormous type of barrel, which we found in the corner of the field and dragged that up, put that on bricks. And that also does one side of that metal shed. So I haven't really been able to test them out much because we've had a pretty insignificant amount of rain. There's another water butt on the chickens' house as well. And then there's another huge barrel off the bus shelter. So the bus shelter is a little tiny house made out of pallets that is to keep the chickens dry during the day, just because they changed where I graze them. And I've basically taken over what was their space for all the flowers. So they went somewhere else. So then they needed shelter. So we built them a structure out of pallets with a roof on the top, and then obviously it just looks like a bus shelter, so we just call it the bus shelter. And of course my other half knows the drill now, so as soon as you put a roof on anything you have to put gutter on. Like, he's so on the ball now. So guttering went up on that immediately, and then there is a barrel on the side of that has collected pretty much nothing this year, because we just haven't had enough rain. And it's also such an enormous barrel, it's well over a metre across, that we would have to have an enormous amount of rain in order to fill that, because It's just so wide that no matter how much rain you get, it just still looks really pathetic. So that is my watering system, and I don't really know how. Well, I do know how successful it is in terms of the water bowsers because I had them last year, and they do fill up. The only thing is that you have to the hose that runs from 1 to 2 and 3, I have disconnected it at the moment because whatever the rain comes, I need it to fill up number 1 for me first. But you have to kind of siphon the water, and in order to that, you have to suck on the end of the hose pipe, which is horrific. I don't know if you've ever had to do that. Not nice job at all. But what I have realised is that if you put a tea towel over the end of the hose pipe and suck through the hose with a tea towel over it, you don't get that massive gush of filthy, muddy water and other detritus in the pipe. Because depending on how quick you are, you can obviously stop and then put the end of the hose pipe in the bowser. But if you don't know, because it's a really, really long distance as well, you've no idea how fast the water is traveling or whatever. So I put a tea towel over the end now so that when I have to start the siphoning process off, it's a lot more civilized, put it that way. So that is everything. And I hope that it all makes sense. As I say, I'll put this little tiny video on and then you can actually see it in real life. So I think that's everything I had to tell you. And I hope to goodness that this is less than 24 minutes. I have a horrible feeling it's not going to be, but we'll see. Now, it is a bank holiday in the UK this weekend, and I understand it's also a bank holiday in America. So, for all my American listeners and everyone in the UK and wherever you're listening, actually, even if it's not a bank holiday, I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a lovely day off on Monday. I'm going to be back with the next episode on Wednesday because I have a funeral to go to on Tuesday afternoon and work in the morning, and I don't know whether I'm going to be in the right state of mind to do the episode on Tuesday. So if you forgive me, I will be back on Wednesday. So the funeral actually is one of my first ever gardening clients. She was a really, really wonderful, incredible lady called Mary who taught me an enormous amount. And she taught me all about caring for roses and pruning them and everything you have to do. And she trusted me with her roses for years. She was a wonderful, wonderful, very special lady, and she'll always have a piece of my heart. And so I'll be going to say a very sad goodbye to her on Tuesday. So that's it from me. Take care of yourself, enjoy everything in the garden, and I will be back next Wednesday.